Hi, this is Robert with CRUZBIKE, and today we are going to be building a Silvio S40 frame. After you have located all the parts, the first step is to install the fork into the frame. We're going to put the crown race over the fork. It is a split race, so simply slide straight on. The bearings are beveled, as you can see, and they will fit bevel side down onto the crown race. We have already pre-greased the headset cups here for the video. We'll slide the steer tube up into the head tube, and we will slide the upper bearing in, as well as the upper cone as shown, and then the top cap. The frame set includes several spacers. This is a good starting point for the height of your handlebars. Just like an upright bike, the steer tube can be cut to lower the pivot clamp if the fit requires it. This would be a step that you would take later on after you have become more accustomed to the ride and handling of your S40. When cutting the steer tube, you want to make sure to include a small gap of about 2 millimeters, so you have plenty of space for the top stem cap to tighten down the star nut and put sufficient pressure on the bearings to prevent a loose headset. We want to sight down the top of the fork, and once we have everything lined up, as you can see here, we want to tighten the stem cap just enough to prevent any slop in the headset bearings, and then we will use a 5 millimeter Allen to tighten the pivot clamp against the steer tube. Next, we will insert the slider into the pivot clamp, and we will install the boom clamp onto the front of the slider, lining up the notch with the notch in the slider. We will install our boom. Note, for shorter riders, you might have to cut about 3 or 4 inches off of the boom. This is perfectly okay if you need to trim some of the boom off in order to get a proper fit. We will then lightly tighten the pivot clamp bolts and the boom clamp bolts just to prevent everything from sliding away. Next, we will install the chainstay over the front fork, and then we will rest the boom bottom bracket into the chainstay. The next thing we would need to do is, using the 4 millimeter bolts, is to attach the top clamps to the end of the chainstay. These are very similar to a handlebar clamp. They are notched so they fit around the welds, so they only fit one direction. Then we will use a 4 millimeter Allen, and we will tighten these bolts. Be sure when tightening these that there is an even gap on either side. And as we can see here, this is how we adjust the distance from the bottom bracket to the seat and the handlebars from the feet at the top of the pedal stroke. The boom and the slider can move together as a unit or independently. The next step is to install the handlebars. If the clamps are very loose or you only have the bottom screws removed, you can usually slide the handlebars through and around the clamps and then simply tighten the clamps back down. The seat is the last step, but we will actually leave the seat off when we are installing components as we will need to route our cable through the cable opening at the front and then out the back for the rear disc brake. Note that this is a cable exit, it is not intended to be a cable stop. So it is a full housing run that goes from the handlebar all the way to the rear brake. When attaching the CRUZBIKE frame to a work stand for component installation, simply use the clamp around the front either of the boom or the steer tube. Hang the back end down a little bit for balance of the front end, and your frame set is ready for components. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, please email us at support@cruzbike.com.